Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange and the host, who might be a gulag prisoner. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels throughout the gulag. So today, it is Short Story Tuesday. A day where I can talk about the short format literature that is strange or eye-grabbing in some way that makes me want to talk about it in some form or another. Today I will be talking about a story from the book Belly Up by Rita Bullwinkel. The specific story that I'll be talking about is in the South, the sand winds are our greatest enemy, which is an interesting title, and it refers to a line in the story where one character says, "In the North, you have to worry about the snow, but in the South, the sand winds are our greatest enemy." And I don't know if that line is significant or not. It seems funny, but I don't think it has any significance in the story. I think it's just something that Rita Bullwinkel liked, so she put it into into the title of the story. For those that don't know, Rita Bullwinkel is a new author. She's written in a bunch of magazines and newspapers and journals. A lot of these short stories have been published in those journals. This is her first book, so interesting to see the first offering that an author shares. In fact, I think this came out this year, if I'm not... no, it came out in 2018, so it's still fairly recent. I enjoyed this book overall. I'll explain why. And I enjoyed the short story that I talked about. There's a few problems with this, which I will also go into. But up front, I can say I recommend this. Go seek it out if you can. I managed to get it at my local library. I feel like I'm running out of short story collections from my local library. So hopefully, I can find some in other areas. Besides having to dig through, the old authors of the 1800s, I want to find more recent ones. Unfortunately, I've also been trying to find some from the 90s and the 2000s, but the big problem there is that the library only carries really recent stuff, which is fair. If that's what people want most of the time, they want new. They want to see what's being offered today. So that's a small problem, but I'll be sure to try to find some older short stories soon, because that'd be fun. So anyways, let's talk about this short story. I'll do a summary, a little analysis, and we'll move on from there. In the South, the sand winds are our greatest enemy. That story focuses on Gleb and Oleg. Gleb is a surgeon, and Oleg is a sculptor, who are their brothers, and they have been banished to the gulags of some unnamed country for some uncertain crime. So they meet with the main officer, Warden dude of the gulag, who informs them that they will now be operating as surgeons, and Gleb decides that he needs to bring Oleg along because his hands work better than Gleb's hands, so they can work in unison. And the main officer, Warden dude, agrees to that. And just goes on his way. The first patient that they see is a man who lost his thumb, and because of the snow or something like that. So he can't really find it at that moment. But they managed to roil around search through the dead bodies and find an appropriate thumb substitute, which magically works. And the old man is able to go back to doing the hard labor that he was assigned. And Gleb and Oleg celebrate, going so far as to drink watered down ether to get drunk, and some of the prisoners are chanting their names as well. This upsets the main officer, Warden dude, who retaliates by sticking an ice pick through the eyes of another prisoner and being like, Gleb and Oleg, fix this. It's your problem. Let's see if you're as bold as you think you are. So they encounter that prisoner, and they end up. What they do is they find a prisoner who has a doll and take the doll's eyes and put it inside the man's eye sockets, and magically that gives him his vision back. And once again they celebrate and dance around, and all the prisoners chant their name because of this miracle. And the main officer sees this and is like, wow, these two people are reincarnations of the devil. They are scary, and so he goes into his office and kills himself by hanging himself in a very weird passage that is kind of grotesque. And outside of the prison, a villager comes upon the prison, hears the chanting, and is like, oh wow, to be a prisoner sounds like a quality time. The prisoner goes home and eventually no longer hears the sounds of the prison, but they're still chanting Gleb and Oleg, as that name has stuck with them. And that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there's a couple things I want to talk about. The first is the like previous collections that I focused on. This one, as well as The Wrong Heaven and Her Body and Other Parties, kind of incorporates a sense of magical realism into the story. In this case, the first example is reattaching a thumb from a dead person, and it shouldn't work, but it does. And that's a little bit vague though. But the other example is putting a doll's eyes in a prisoner who lost their eyes, and those eyes granting that prisoner vision. And it shouldn't happen, but it magically it does, and it causes all the prisoners to celebrate, and worries the warden of the whole place. I consider it a bit escapist too. Maybe this is a skewed version of what's actually happening, and Gleb and Oleg are changing the outcome in their minds to make them feel better. But I prefer to lean on the magical realist side of things. So it's interesting that Bullwinkel here would interesting name. Bullwinkel would incorporate that into her story, and it exists within the other stories too. So I feel like that's a common thread throughout everything is interesting worlds that don't function how you think they would. Another interesting thing that I picked up in the story was the idea of control, and what happens when someone feels they're losing that sense of control. The gulag officer, the warden dude, he's pretty much in control of this facility, of this prison. He assigns the jobs, he orders the prisoners around, and when he begins to lose control, he reacts violently. When Gleb and Oleg are partying around and not really struggling as one would expect prisoners to struggle, he reacts by stabbing out the eyes of another prisoner in order to give them more of a challenge and regain that sense of control. And when that doesn't work out, and when they actually help that prisoner regain their eyesight, the warden dude, kills himself. He no longer feels like he has control, and so he assumes, oh well, these two must be the devil. They've upset my life. And it's interesting that they mention the devil, because so many stories about prison wardens feature the warden as a god figure. So who comes in to oppose God? The devils, and that's interesting how he chooses to kill himself rather than confront these devils in his eyes. The last thing I want to talk about is the villager of the story. They just happen upon the prison and they see this celebration happening, and it seems like a pretty big deal. And they're like, oh, to be in prison, it seems like a quality time, which is an interesting way of thinking about things. And then as the prisoner is leaving, they walk home through the snow, and Bullwinkel describes it in a way that I found to be of note. So allow me to read this to you. He shuffled his feet and carried his heavy load of wood and wool. As he walked, the moon rose above him, and a flock of geese gawked, it seemed, directly at him. The space between the villager and the prison widened, and snow flurried in quicker circles around him. The wind and the ice deadened the noise that the villager had heard from the prison. From the moment till the end of his trek, the only sounds that the villager heard were simply the noise of the elements hurling things at him. In an attempt to shield himself, the villager pulled his fur hood further over his forehead. So what you see there is Bullwinkel, the narrator, describing how as the villager moves further away, they can no longer hear the prison. Like, although it seems like a big thing at the prison, like there's a different world outside. It's no longer the center focus. So like the prison warden killing himself, like the prison was his entire world, and these two people came in and changed it to the villager. Like it's not really a big deal. They have their own life to worry about. Although they something that undercuts this is that the villager does start chanting Gleb and Oleg, like dancing around in the way the prisoners were doing, which I think would suggest that although the prison is its own little world, a piece of it escaped and influenced the surrounding village that is near the prison. So I don't really know what to make of that. If you do, feel free to comment below. I would love to hear from you. And then the last thing I want to talk about is how this story, something that I don't like so much is how it seems like it's a fable, but without a sense of purpose. Like it seems like Bullwinkel is trying to tell you something, like trying to explain a moral or something like that, but she never really gets to the point. And maybe I'm just missing the point. Maybe there is no moral, but it does have that kind of fable sense with the stories, multiple stories in this collection that don't quite seem to go anywhere near the end, and I'd say that's the only problem with this story. Like it's very entertaining. It just seems meandering at times, and I don't quite fully understand what Bullwinkel is trying to say, if she's trying to say anything at all. So those are my thoughts on Belly Up, and in the South, the Sand Winds are our greatest enemy. A very long short story title, a very interesting short story. I think worth reading. Again, I recommend it. If you can find it, go seek it out. She has, I believe that this short story was published elsewhere, so you could probably find it online if you have a subscription to that. If you just want to seek out that short story. Otherwise, feel free to comment below if you want to share something about this story or talk about my review or mention anything else. I'd love to hear from you and have a discussion. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people may find out about Belly Up and peruse it at their own desire. Follow me on Twitter at AroundTheWeird, so we can talk about groovy things like books and movie and television and all kinds of fun pop culture things. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and imprisoned travels. How are you going to travel if you're also imprisoned? That's a good question. Farewell.